Listen to the wind in the junipers and the tales of the shifting, whispering sands. Wild horses on the run into the setting sun and the smell of the leather in his hand.
Hello again. Welcome to the Ike Pickett Show. I'm Ike Pickett. I have a few words of wisdom for you today. Credit is not your friend. If you bought into the impression that the Federal Reserve is government controlled and not a private institution, I'm here to tell you that you're not fully informed. I appreciate all the truth you've learned, but it's time for all people to realize that not only is the Federal Reserve a private institution, the United States federal government is a customer of the Federal Reserve. The executive branch of the federal government has been largely bought and controlled by the same private group of moneymongers that own the Federal Reserve ever since its creation. An ignorant Congress passed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, but the power of the financial system of the United States was delegated by Congress to the private bankers, who of course promised to execute their responsibilities with integrity, like the fox that promised to watch over the chicken coop. The Federal Reserve is not technically a private institution, but it is run by a board of governors with lots of money, global interest, and encompassing agendas to control the entire world. Global Research reported in 2011 that, quote, the four horsemen of banking, Bank of America, J.P. Morgan, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo, own the four horsemen of oil, ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch Shell, BP, and Chevron Texaco. In tandem with Deutsche Bank, BNP, Barclays, and other European old money behemoths. But their monopoly over the global economy does not end at the edge of the oil patch. According to company 10-K filings to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the four horsemen of banking are among the top 10 stockholders of virtually every Fortune 500 corporation. End of quote. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The European banker Mayer Amschel Rothschild, father of the concept of lending money to countries, mostly to finance wars, said in the 1700s, "Give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws." And so he did so, as he had learned from his predecessors, and others have followed his example since then. So they buy up the local banks and the media with fiat money that is created out of nothing by debt, and feed the people propaganda so they'll think that parties' next elections give them control. Stir the pot by holding their attention to trivial things and events, and keep them focused on domestic conflicts between Republicans, Democrats, liberals, and conservatives, while they quietly manipulate the outcome in their favor by controlling money created by debt in the background. They lend money to the countries, money that they have invented and created out of nothing, to finance wars for both sides, buy up the media, feed the citizens lies, and find or create incidents to hold their attention, while they quietly turn up the heat and step by step screw down the lid until they can finally boil the frog by control of the monies of the entire world by the rule of law, described by President George H.W. Bush, instead of the rule of freedom that is set forth and protected by the United States Constitution and the common law. Woodrow Wilson, only one of the U.S. presidents to give up and sell principles for pottage to win an election, signed the Federal Reserve Act into law in 1913, and then he declared this, quote, our great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Therefore, all of our activities are in the hands of a small group of men who chill and check true economic freedom. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, completely controlled, and dominated governments in the world. no longer a government of the majority, but a government of the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. End of quote. The stock market crash of 1929 and the subsequent beholding was brought onto the U.S. by the greed and speculation of investors, and especially deepened by design when these same private financiers bailed the United States people out of the Great Depression with an increase of indebtedness to the money mongers by Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal. The New Deal was evidently pulled off by executive order, not by the Congress or the vote of the people, as was the elimination of the gold standard by the Nixon administration in 1971. Do you think these presidents were not playing patty-cake baker's man with the central bankers back then? There was no income tax before the creation of the Federal Reserve, and no withholding of income tax in the United States before 1935 and the completion of the New Deal. Income tax withholding from the citizens was a condition of the New Deal. A plethora of social programs were created by the New Deal, and in order to obtain food and shelter, 1 million starving citizens went to work for the government. The people of the United States have had little to do or say about the way the government or the economy is run for more than a century now. Democracy and the republic have become only dreams ever since bankers and the super-rich began to buy elections and provoke wars in order to create national debt, amass more wealth than have their way with the countries of the world. When corporations and banks are placed in control of governments and the people, it's called fascism. It could also be called extortion. Incidentally, if you want to know more about how imperialism works, look closely at the lending activities of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Struggling countries are typically obligated to pay debts that are impossible for them to pay to build their infrastructures, while the funds flow into the coffers of a few super-rich U.S. corporations contracted to create the infrastructures of such as utilities and systems, while the people become more and more impoverished. As United States companies were contracted to build these facilities, the loan funds were simply transferred from one bank to another inside the United States to pay the contractors, such as Bechtel and their U.S. workers, and the poor people of the now indebted country saw very little of it. Millions of dollars were provided to their corrupt leaders, who willingly or forcibly sold principals for pottage and signed on for the loans. The wealth of the United States has become concentrated into the hands of less than 1% of the population, and those who have it have gravitated to other countries in order to avoid liabilities to their workers and the general population, and to avoid the taxation that has been put upon the people by them and their colleagues. Greedy capitalists have declared themselves exempt from the constitutional laws of the country and from taxation. However, they are finally on a course that will implement their own demise. Capitalism is not the problem. The abuse of capitalism is the problem. The New World Order, described by George H.W. Bush, will not work out as planned. There's too much public awareness in conflict with governments such as Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, those that make up the BRICS, and now others are joining the BRICS. Saudi Arabia is recently moving toward the BRICS, noting that the United States has abandoned the deal that recognizes the United States dollar as the only currency that oil would be traded in. The New Deal is dead. The so-called world leaders all want to be in control. El Salvador and other countries are admirably leading the way, leaving bankers to fall into the sea along with their free trade and national debt programs. Andrew Jackson, when he was President of the United States in 1832, in an attempt to preserve the constitutional republic from the bankers, said this, quote, It is to be regretted that the rich and powerful too often bend the acts of government to their selfish purposes. He told the bankers, quote, "You are a den of vipers, and I will rout you out." End of quote. The bankers simply backed away and waited for Jackson to be removed by a new election, the outcome of which they thought could be manipulated with their money and their propaganda. Sam Ervin said this, quote, "The Constitution was made to guard the people against the dangers of good intentions. There are men of all ages who mean to govern. They promise to be good masters, but they mean to be masters." End of quote. Citizens beware. Even Hitler and the Nazis had good intentions. No matter where you live in the world, if all of this scares you, don't let it. Fear is not a useful tool of a free people, and you have nothing to fear if you're standing where you should. The lines are being drawn more vividly than ever before. The world financial system with its central banks will finally disintegrate. Money is not everything. In fact, it has very little value when it is compared to the worth of a man. Humanity will ultimately prevail, but not under the iron fist of a handful of rich taskmasters. So I wrote this song for you. It's called "The Devil is a Windmill."
The devil is a windmill that's blowing constantly. Sometimes I think the windmill is more powerful than me. But then I remember who I am, and truth is on my side. Deception is my enemy, but truth won't run and hide. My soul is slave to the greedy, yearn for the day to be free. Rich men on the backs of the needy, no thought for people like me. But the time will come when we'll be free. I've been a slave to the system, follow the money around, ever so steady but never get ready. The system is getting me down, living the relevant lifestyle, myth of the American dream, paying the man whenever I can with little left over for me. My soul a slave to the greedy, yearn for a day to be free. Rich men on the backs of the needy, no thought for people like me. But the time will come when we'll be free. Rich men on the backs of the needy, no thought for people like me. But the time will come when we'll all be free.
The super rich are not stricken smart just because they're rich. They probably underestimate the power of truth and the resilience of common men whose souls cannot be bought and who would rather live free and responsibly than as slaves, no matter the cost. However, the globalists are smart enough to know that debt can be used as a tool to enslave people and countries. Freedom will win, but it requires courage. Free people on the right side will win this push and shove contest. Truth will always prevail in the long run. It appears that individuals would do well at any point in time to avoid debt, a tool of the enslaver's trade. Stay alert and awake, choose which side to serve, and stand firmly with your choices. For more information and to keep in touch with me, I invite you to visit me and leave comments or ask questions on the web at enforcefreedom.org. Worldwide financial independence and survival are in the balance. Courage, humility, honesty, truth, patience, and persistence are the tools for the preservation of personal freedom. God wants you to be free and personally responsible so you can continue to grow and become stronger, happier, and better. You're on the right side. thanks for being with me today. I sincerely care about you, or I wouldn't be doing this. I have nothing to gain by it other than to know for myself that I have done the best that I can. This is Ike Pickett, signing off for now. Keep smiling and sleep well tonight. I'll see you again soon.
Listen to the wind in the junipers and the tales of the shifting, whispering sands. Wild horses on the run into the setting sun, and the smell of the leather in his hand.